built to commemorate some of the important historic events that have taken place in this town. But the main one I want to point out to you guys, do you see the skull and graveyard just there?
Mm-hmm.
That is to commemorate the Spanish flu. That was a global pandemic that killed 20 million people all around the world. And if something like that is important enough to make it onto your town monument, you know it had some effect. So we're going to talk about the Spanish flu a little bit more later tonight. But I just want to make sure you guys saw that.
Okay.
All right, guys, let's go.
Never knew that.
They had something like that in Philadelphia with some kind of typhoid
Oh, no.
cough or something.
Yeah. And I think Typhoid Mary was in New York? Yeah. Not very nice. Thank God for modern medicine is all I have to say.
Yep.
There isn't usually anybody coming down here, so we don't always wait for the light, but just to make sure. Yeah, no, we're good. Okay. So now we are coming up to a Woolworth's that's famous all around the world. And I know you mentioned you've been there.
Yes.
That's right. It is now an International Civil Rights Museum. This Woolworth's up here is very famous because on February 1st, 1960, 4 students from North Carolina A&T University had the first sit-in of the Civil Rights Movement just there at the lunch counter. We're very, very proud of that history. And that lunch counter is famous everywhere.
Yeah.
We still have half of it, and the other half of it is at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. But what you guys might not know about this Woolworths is that when they were putting in the museum, they uncovered a 1960s bomb shelter underneath.
Oh, fabulous.
No one knew it was there, so it was just like a time capsule you could walk into.
Oh,
They had all the original cans and supplies. Very, very cool.
how neat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's a nice night. Last night we were lucky we got this beautiful big orange full moon. right
Yes,
through
it was nice last night.
Oh, it was terrific. So are you guys familiar with O. Henry?
I'm not.
Not so much?
No.
Well, O. Henry was a very influential American writer of short stories, and he actually got his start working at his uncle's pharmacy across the street.
Huh.
How about Lunsford Richardson? Do you guys know who that is? Most people don't. No one ever does. Do you guys know who Vicks Vapor Rub?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, there you go. Now you know Lunsford Richardson. He actually
Alright.
invented Vicks Vapor Rub at that same pharmacy, and he invented it to help people cope with the Spanish flu. Unfortunately, Mr. Richardson himself also died of the Spanish flu. So that's karma for you or something.
Yep.
Maybe not. All right, you guys. We're going to keep going down this way, down Elm Street. This is Elm Street. It's our main street in town. A lot of our cool stuff is here when you're
Yeah.
looking. I'm not from here.
Thank you. I love your food.
Thank you.
Okay. The art of tacos.
All right, you guys. We're right across here. Just like across the road. All right, guys, we take a left here. Ooh, there's a nice crazy alleyway for us.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Although these days it's a little more free than creepy.
Yeah, I just wonder what you run into down here going through some of these back alleyways about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah. All right, we're going to stop just up here so we can kind of try to keep out of make yourselves comfortable. I like to start tours with one of the creepier stories that we have. Now this is the one, the first time that I heard it, it gave me nightmares for a week. So, I hope you guys think it's scary too. So, you guys are probably, well, you may or may not be familiar with Elsewhere Collaborative. Not so much? Okay, you probably don't know. So it's, if you go down to Elm Street and follow it down a little ways, on the other side of the train tracks, there's a place called Elsewhere. This place is a living history museum. Now, that's kind of a strange term, but what that means, the gentleman that owns it, he set it up as kind of a living tribute to his grandmother. While she was alive, his grandmother was a very eclectic woman. She never threw out anything that she ever bought. So a little bit like Hoarders, but less newspapers and more dolls. Ooh, I know.
My mom, she's got clowns and stuff everywhere. She
does.
part of that.
Yeah, they might have been friends. Yeah, for sure. So there is one room in there that is floor to ceiling all dolls. Very creepy. I don't do dolls myself. So this guy, lovely guy. I'll tell you the kind of guy he is, right? So him and his friends. The story starts one night he had them over. Now they're all real thrill seekers, right? So they're the kind of people that are gonna go out on Friday the 13th. They're gonna go to the scariest movie they can find. They're gonna run home through the woods in the dark and try to scare each other. You know, they're those kind of guys. They like ghost tours. They like ghost stories. In my opinion, some people like that may have not experienced anything truly scary. But all that was about to change for these guys. So this night he has his friends over. There's a whole bunch of them in one of the rooms upstairs. You know, it's kind of dim, and they're all taking turns reading The Telltale Heart. Edgar Allan Poe, one of my favorites. So they're passing it around, they're taking turns reading. You know, one guy reads a paragraph, the next girl reads a couple of more, and all the while they're sneaking up and tapping each other on the shoulder, and one of the guys is going, bum, 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 right on the floor. Ooh, very spooky, right? And everyone's like, okay, you know, like this is ridiculous. It's a little creepy, but we know we're causing it. This is nothing, whatever. Let's do something really special. Always beware when people say something like that. So they said, let's do something really special. Let's do something to connect us with this building. It's a beautiful old building. A lot of history in it, but a lot of history that they don't know about yet. And they're about to find out the hard way, let me tell you. So they decide they're all gonna sit in a circle in the room. They're all gonna sit so their backs are right up against the wall. No one can sneak up behind them. And they're all more than arm's width away from each other, so they can't touch each other. They can't mess with each other at all. They decide they're gonna sit so far apart that nobody can mess with them, and they're gonna turn off all of the lights, so it's just completely pitch dark. And they're just gonna wait for something to happen. Maybe something will happen, maybe it won't, maybe they'll fall asleep. Maybe they'll just giggle in the dark for a couple hours, who knows. So the guy gets up, he goes over to the light switch, he says, okay guys, you ready? All right, they're ready, everyone's in a good mood, let's do this. So he flips off the light switch. A couple of minutes, no, not minutes, seconds, after he turns off the light switch, before he even gets a chance to sit down, one of the girls starts screaming her head off. So they turn the lights back on, and when they see her face, they know that it's no joke, they're not having fun anymore. She is insensible. Her face is completely pale. She sounds nuts. She says, get me out of here, I can't be in this building anymore, get me out of here, take me out of here. So they take her downstairs, they get her out to the street before she'll even say a word. They get her out there, and they say, what happened? She says, the second he turned the lights off, she felt a hand go down her neck. She was against the wall. She felt these fingers on her shoulder. She tried to pull away, and as she tried to pull away, it jerked her back into the wall, and she was pinned. But the second they turned those lights back on, they could see there was no one there. No one was messing with her, but she knew what she felt. They could not reason with her. They couldn't make her go back in there for love or money. She just wanted to go home. So she went back home. She went to her safe apartment, her safe, not haunted apartment. And she just laid in bed all night long, just staring at the ceiling until the sun started to come up. So it's daytime. Things are a little less scary in the daytime. She's starting to feel a little bit better. She wants to take her mind off of it. It's March. Everything that happens in this town happens in March, I swear. It's so weird. So it's March, and she's getting ready for spring break. She's going to Myrtle Beach. She's got a vacation coming up. So she decides she's going to go get a tan. That'll make me feel better. I'm going to go get a tan. So she goes. And then she goes back home. She's feeling okay. she takes off her clothes, she's getting ready to go in the shower. And she checks out her reflection to make sure her tan is even. And everything on the front looks terrific. She's very happy. And she turns around. She has one of those little hand mirrors. She can see her reflection in the mirror. And on that same shoulder, there was an untanned, perfectly white handprint. Oh. There was an untanned handprint. That is such a weird manifestation of it to me, but that's what happened to her. So she ran back down to Elsewhere. She shouted at her friend to come out onto the street and take a look at that. You guys thought I was nuts last night? You better see this. So they all went out onto the street, him and the couple of people who were still hanging around, and they saw it. They saw that handprint on her shoulder. Everyone saw it, all the fingers and everything. Very, very, very spooky. So when we heard the story, we thought, you know, it's a good story. It's true. You know, it's kind of strange. So we started looking into it. And I'm not going to tell you guys any stories tonight that don't have some kind of basis in historical fact. So we started doing a little bit of digging, and it turns out there was a catastrophic tornado in the 1930s that came through town, right through where Elsewhere was and the neighboring buildings. It ripped the top floor off of Jules Antiques next door, and it killed 13 people. We thought maybe that was what it was. So Jules Antiques is known to have a residual haunting. So all that means is they believe that there is somebody upstairs that is reliving that same trauma night after night after night. And no matter who's in there, whether there's anybody in the building or not, every single night they lock the windows, they lock the doors, they lock the gate, there's no one in there. Every single night the same window opens. And I've seen it. Every time I come to town, I drive past that window's open. It's very, very spooky. So we thought the window thing was kind of odd until we found out back in the 30s, they used to tell you that if a tornado was coming to town, you should open your windows to relieve the pressure. Do not ever do that. If you learn one thing from this tour, do not ever, ever, ever open your windows when there is a tornado coming. Pardon me. So, we've been telling this story for 10 years. Something happened down there 5 years ago that takes this story from being scary to being terrifying. Now this is where it gets good, you guys. So, about 5 years ago, there was a man that bought the store next door to Elsewhere. It's a double storefront. The building is just as old. You know, it's all part of the same kind of structure. So, for some reason, people get weird vibes in there. You know, nothing is ever hung out there for very long. You know, someone will open and then they'll move out within a year. You know, different things like that. Just because of different kind of feelings they've had in there. So, he thought, whatever, I'm not afraid of ghosts. It's okay. So he moves in there, and he's getting ready to turn it into a bar. He's going to have a craft beer place. They're going to do wine tastings. It's called Sessions. He's very, very excited. And he's a very handy kind of guy. So he decides he's going to do a lot of DIY stuff himself. You know, it's going to keep costs down, and that's cool. So he got the old blueprints to the building. Now, there was something strange about the blueprints that didn't add up. And he knew a little bit more about buildings than I do, fortunately, because I'd make a mess of it. But he's looking at him. And one of the walls, it has the wall, just as usual, but then there's a space, and then there's another wall. And there's no reason for that space. It wasn't very large, it wasn't a room. It was more like kind of a crawl space kind of situation. Very strange. He couldn't figure it out. But he had decided he wanted to put a window there. He was going to maybe do like some kind of storage, maybe put some glasses up there, or, you know, something he could hand drinks through, you know, something kind of cool. So, it's late one night in March. It's after 11. He's had a very long day of working on this bar. And he decides he can't wait anymore. He's got to know what's behind that wall. Curiosity was just killing him. So he drills a little hole in the bricks, and he looks through. And he doesn't see anything but darkness. You know, I mean, it makes sense. There's not a lot of source of light. He doesn't think anything of it. If you haven't been in there yet, they do great coffee, very good cheesecake.
I was wondering, I passed out at the little cheesecake.
Oh yeah, no, they do like 50 kinds of cheesecake.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of other stuff too. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So very nice. There's some very cool stuff. We have some neat places we're going tonight that I would love to hear if you guys decide to investigate.
I've got some investigation right here.
Oh really?
A little bit.
Carolina Theater.
You're probably gonna know more about that than I do. Oh, that's fantastic.
A little bit. We didn't get to, close up at night or anything like that.
Just a little bit. Well, that's very cool. All right, you guys, we're going to pause here just real quick. This isn't a proper stop, but I just want to point something out to you. You see, across the street, there's a green sign over there. You can just about make it out, but what it says is Former Methodist Cemetery. So, this is a ghost tour. You know we're going to talk about the cemetery. I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind for later so you know where it is, all right? Okay. So these are some very historic condos. But behind this brick wall is a pool. Now when they were digging out that pool, they found a whole stash of Civil War cannonballs down there. And neat, huh? Those are not cannonballs that were fired at us, but they're actually being stored there. Yeah, so that's kind of neat. Now, we have just entered a very old and very active part of downtown. It doesn't look like much these days, but quite a lot happened here. So this area used to be known as Hamburger Square, and they called it that in the 1940s because at that time there was a hamburger place on each of the four corners of this intersection. They said that you could smell hamburgers any time of the day or night from either side of the street. And that's not particularly relevant to the story, but it's just a neat little factoid. So before it was known as Hamburger Square, this was the middle of the red light district, right here. So the working ladies used to hang around the old Civil War train station, and they would just try to pick up guys moving through town. Because back in the day, if you had money to ride the rails, you probably had money for some company, right? So they would take them to any of the kind of surrounding hotel type establishments. Natty Green's was here at the time. They used to have hotels that they would sell by the hour, or hotel rooms. The Cascade Saloon, you can't quite see it from here, but if you do get a chance to look at it, it's a building that's right between the two railroad tracks, right up there. It's going to be an art gallery or something now, but back in the day it wasn't so nice. There are a couple of other places nearby that they used to go, and of course a lot of alleys and side streets as well. So that is going to be a little pertinent to some of the stories we're telling a little bit later, so keep that in your mind too. But this story is about a train. So we're surrounded by train tracks where we are now, and trains have always been very, very important to Greensboro's history. So I want you guys, this is very difficult, try to imagine what it would have been like to live here during the Civil War. So you live in Greensboro, and you know that war is coming to you, but you don't know which side you're going to be on. That is the situation that North Carolina was in. So North Carolina actually voted to remain in the Union several times until Lincoln ordered the local troops to go down and put the rebellion down in Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Now, that was kind of the final straw. So back in the day, North Carolina and South Carolina were very, very, very close. Up until about 1710, there wasn't even North and South Carolina. It was just Carolina. It was just a colony. So at the time, they still thought those are our brothers and sisters down there. We're not gonna fight them. So regardless of where they fell on the issues, they decided to side with South Carolina. Because it's, you know, it's kind of, it's taking your brother's side. You got to look after him. So that's what they did, basically. So we are in Guilford County. The local troops were known as the Guilford Greys. So these are any able-bodied men that can fight. So we're talking fathers, brothers, sons, husbands, any man who can go. So they all shipped out to fight. And the ones who stayed home, their families, their wives, their kids, their elderly parents, they all stayed home and waited for news. It was a very, very emotional time. So eventually news started coming in. Battles won, battles lost. Until one night, finally, again in March, this whole incident took place late March, early April of 1865. This is when the Civil War truly came to Greensboro. It was very late one night, unannounced. A train whistle just screamed through the sky. A train was coming in that no one was expecting. The Guilford Greys were coming home, but they were not coming home in the condition that their family members hoped to find them in. That train was completely packed full of bodies, dead bodies, and also soldiers needing urgent medical attention. So they unloaded that train, and then after that, another train came through, same thing. Another train, same thing. At the time, the population of Greensboro was only about 2,000 people, and that night they unloaded 1,000 men needing urgent medical attention. Not to mention countless, countless bodies. So why here? Why did they come here? Or did we just have bad luck or what? Well, they were retreating, these men, from the front lines of the Battle of Bentonville, just up the tracks, just outside of Raleigh. We were just the next safest stop down the line. So they just loaded everybody on a train and just got them the heck out of there. And this is where they ended up. So we had no Cone Hospital at the time, of course. So we had no doctors. We had a bunch of women and kids, right? But it fell to them to take care of these men. There was no one else. It was their responsibility. They had to look after them. They were dying in the train station. So they did what they could. They had little hospitals kind of popping up wherever they could fit them. And half the time, it ended up being in their own homes. So they take these soldiers in, their dining room tables become hospital beds. It's so hard to picture. But Elm Street was a completely different sight. It was chaos in the streets. There were tents everywhere. There were bonfires all up and down the street to provide light for the amputations taking place. And of course, when you have a lot of unskilled people doing these things, you have a lot of people with terrible, terrible wounds. You have a lot of people who are sick. You get a lot more bodies. And they ran out of places to put them. So they would bury them anywhere they could find the space. They buried them on either side of the train tracks, just anywhere they could fit them, anywhere. They stacked them up outside of the old courthouse at the intersection of Elm and Market Street. They stacked them up outside and they sat there in the heat for days.
Oh, Lord.
We didn't have any men who were able to dig holes for them. We had a bunch of women who were trying to keep stuff together, trying to deal with this stuff. I don't know how I would have coped with it personally. And it's difficult to imagine. But with all of that death, all of those bodies comes disease. So a lot of the people who were in okay health, of course, got that as well. So, I mean, it's very difficult. It's difficult to imagine for us now, you know, because Greensboro is so beautiful and clean and lovely, but all of that happened right here, you know? And it wasn't so very long ago. It's relatively recent history. Goodness. But if you can imagine it, that's what happened. So there are a couple of places in Greensboro that a lot of local people will not go because of things that they've heard or seen, or maybe just kind of strange feelings that they've had. One of those places is the History Museum. It's a big, old, beautiful building, and during the Civil War, it was a church, and it became a hospital for just anyone needing help. They buried a lot of the unknown soldiers outside of it. It's no wonder, really, that you walk in there and it feels a little strange. But the other place that they will not go is the site of the old Civil War train station. That train station is not here anymore, but there's a park where it used to be. And that park is known as Hamburger Square Park. And that's where we're standing right now. So, every time I'm here, I wonder a little bit about who's still down there. This is another one of those cases where the history is literally beneath our feet.
Wow.
Right. So, we get a lot of trains coming through here. I figure we probably get one tonight. We might hear one later on. I think we heard one earlier. But the next time you guys hear a train whistle, and you can hear them all over town. I hear them from my bedroom window at night, 10 miles down the road. you know, next time you guys hear one, I want you to think of two things, okay? The first one, just try to imagine what it would have been like to live here at the time, hearing that train coming in and knowing exactly what was on it. So grim. And the second thing, I want you to know a lot of the hauntings and the things that happen downtown are a direct result of what that train brought that night, that kind of death it brought into this town. And you'll never look at trains the same way again, I promise you. So, the next place I want to take you guys has been named officially haunted by a paranormal society. We are going to our local Irish pub, McCools, right across the street. Let's go, you guys. And watch your stuff, there's all kinds of stuff.
So the Ghost Adventures come to Greensboro?
I believe they have, yeah. I'm not sure which ones that they've looked at. I think that they've been to the Biltmore. There are a couple of videos on YouTube that you can find. Really, really neat one. There was one where they put an orange in one of the haunted rooms, and like the ghost actually appears to rotate it kind of back and forth. It's really cool.
Oh, cool.
And that's one of our stops today. That was my favorite. But I think that they've been there. Quite a lot of different TV shows have come, and I couldn't swear to exactly which one's been in which building, but I can tell you a lot of the ones that they've done. I think Ghost Adventures have. Alright, so this is a small group. I want to take you guys the fun way around, okay? It's been redone now, but that's the original staircase. And that's going to come in handy in the next story, so I just wanted to show you guys. You guys see these bathtubs? Yeah. Those are the original bathtubs that were in this building, but it served a different purpose, and I can't wait to tell you about them. We're going to go somewhere a little safer and a little quieter, though, I think. Right down this way. You guys can see Nathaniel Green over here. He's the man that Greensboro was named after. So, in the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, he was fighting against Cornwallis with the British. But Cornwallis really admired the way that they handled themselves. And there's actually an inscription on the side of that, which is a compliment. He said, Cornwallis did, "Never in my life have I seen such fighting. The Americans fought like demons." Now, interestingly enough, Cornwallis also spent some time in Charlotte, and he liked Charlotte. He said, "Charlotte is a very agreeable town, but being there was like living in a veritable hornet's nest of rebellion." And that's where the Charlotte Hornets come from.
Okay.
It's not just bees. So you guys can get a real good view of McCools just there. Come on around over here. You can see it, get some ideas about places to go for later. So, McCools has been named officially haunted by a paranormal society. There have been quite a few investigations in here because of the things that have happened. So I can't tell you all the stories, we'd be here all night, but I'm going to tell you a couple that we heard directly from the owner. So, this building is very old. There are a lot of different businesses inside it now, but McCools is just kind of the back end. It was built in the late 1800s, and when they decided to turn it into an Irish bar, they did quite a lot of renovations. Now, some people think that renovations stir up ghosts. If there's an old house that might have somebody inside it. Maybe they liked it the way it was and they don't want you to mess with it. And well, that was certainly the case here. So, the owner noticed a couple of strange things going on right away. Kind of weird movements of the light fixtures and things that she couldn't really explain, but things that you can kind of brush off as, you know, maybe I'm imagining things. But my favorite story of hers started not long after they opened. She was sitting downstairs and she was training one of the new bartenders. So they were sitting together and going through some paperwork. And all of a sudden, she feels